welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me and like reaching out.
Yeah, of course. I feel like at this point I'm creating this like collective of people who are at this point gonna know each other.
Oh
Because
yeah.
you knew Maxie and Hyacinth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like, oh, okay, so it's just gonna be a whole family. That'll be fun.
It'll be really fun.
So go ahead and just like take a second to just like introduce yourself to the people listening.
Okay. Okay. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Okay, so my name is Marissa. I go by Mar. My pronouns are they, she, and I am based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I own a small business, roasting business called Tan Brown Coffee, and we focus very heavily on sourcing and roasting Asian coffees. It was something that when I was working as a barista, I definitely didn't see a lot of Asian coffees represented on specialty shelves, and I was
Right.
like met with a lot of feedback of, oh, well, it's just not good enough. And I would ask the question of why, because if it's not good enough, then why is it in every single blend, right?
Yeah.
But not, yeah. So it was something that really resonated with me, and I started Tan Brown Coffee. And yeah, I just bounce around here and there doing other like coffee community kind of things. And um, I don't know,
No, you're
especially when it comes to like competitions and stuff. I really like being on the behind the scenes
Mhm.
side, whether it be like coaching or judging or like doing that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's been really fun.
Yeah, I was like super interested in learning more about tan brown coffee. I was like, I don't see a lot of people doing that, and it's awesome that you started that kind of community for yourself and legacy of kind of highlighting Asian voices as well.
Oh, yeah. So I think like I got really excited to do Tan Brown Coffee when I don't know, it kind of just started as a project,
Hmm.
partially because I had always wanted to learn how to roast. But when I would reach out to people to ask more about like how do you roast, how do you do this, how do you whatever, it's a really gate kept kind of skill
Oh,
for seemingly no reason. It's literally cooking. Like, and if you know how to cook, you can learn how to roast. And if you know how to taste things, you can learn how to roast.
right.
But I think I didn't know that at the time or had like more ownership over that kind of concept. So I would ask a lot of people locally, a lot of cis men, just like, can you help me with this? And I would be met with a lot of like, oh no, you have to work for us if you want to learn this skill, or like people be kind of creepy to me, and I'm like, I'm not really about that. Like, I just genuinely want to learn about coffee, and I want to
Yeah.
learn like more about these skills. I'm a really analytical person. This seemed kind of nerdy and fun. So,
Right.
um, yeah, that's all I really wanted to do. But then I think I didn't really see that. So then I did, or I my entrance into roasting was kind of like through Glitter Cat,
Yeah.
which is no longer, but it was a very beautiful thing. And that's how also I met Haya through Glitter Cat. We did the digitician. So
Hmm.
during when there was more like quarantine kind of times,
Yeah.
we yeah, there were just like the individual competitions and things like that. And I applied for roasting because I didn't know anything about it, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity to learn.
Hmm.
And it really was. We use like these handheld kind of like pan roasting kind of things over the
Oh,
stove.
like
Uh,
old school right there.
yeah, like old school. Because I mean, like you can't like send all these people like roasters, right? So we had to learn the concepts, but I think it really helped me understand more about like applying heat and doing these types of things. And it also kind of demystified roasting as a concept for me and made it a lot more accessible.
How,
Um,
how did you feel when you like finally got to roasting? Did you feel like it was like anticlimactic, or was it like, ah, this is the nerdy like wonder that I wanted it to be?
I love it. I think
Mhm.
it's so fun. I think it's because there's a level of like simplicity in it,
That's true.
as well as like it is kind of anticlimactic once you're doing it because you're just like, oh, these beans go in here and then they come out and then it's like, okay, cool. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, I think what's so neat about it is there are different levels of like control and
Mhm.
nuance. And I've always just been someone who really appreciates, like I really love, like my favorite things are roasting and brewing, and like they're so, I feel like you can zoom in very like pointedly at
Mhm.
really like weird and nuanced things.
Yeah.
And I think it's really beautiful, and I think
So,
also like being someone who really likes like poetry and like
mm,
overly romanticize certain things, I'm like,
yeah,
oh, this is
I can
so
really
so
relate.
beautiful. Like it just makes my
Yeah.
heart like so I think
No,
it's kind of
trust me.
funny.
I really relate to that on a very like basically I'm also into poetry and really into like romanticism literature in general, but I really agree with the fact that like once you have this idea of roasting, it seems really like, oh, I'm gonna roast coffee and I'm gonna be good at it and I'm gonna make like great coffee beans and then I'm just gonna tell a story of how I made these coffee beans. And then you actually just get to it and you're like, oh, you're just like watching a screen.
Yeah,
But
I
what you're talking about, like the constant variables you have to control and how that actually alters the coffee, like a few seconds or like 20 seconds can make a difference on the Meyer time or like having a longer percentage for a development phase, like completely changes like the body. And like if you want something like more acidic, like it feels like it is cooking, like you said. You have complete
yeah.
utter control over that gas valve. So you're basically like, let me see, do I want this? Do I want that? And then that's my favorite part of roasting. It's just like when you can like just also deal with those little details and then you cup them and they're like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like all I did was just let this go longer. I had this go shorter, or I ended this hotter, or I ended this cooler.
Yeah, I love that part. And I think what's kind of cool about that too is a lot of the times those won't be noticed from roast to roast if you're not cupping them next to each other.
Yeah,
Which I think is kind of, it takes the pressure off in some degrees because not every roast is going to be exactly the same,
right.
and not every coffee is going to be exactly the same. So I think there's a beauty of being able to like zoom in, then zoom out, and
Hmm.
then put more of an analytical view on it, and then be able to kind of be okay with whatever happens, you know?
Yeah.
And I really enjoy and love that.
So what got you started in your coffee journey? Did you also start off as a barista, or was it like, did you want to be in coffee? I know I feel like I've asked this question a few times, and it's like I always feel like coffee is never the first stop for a lot of people.
Yeah, I've always loved coffee, and I think so my background before coffee
Hmm.
was industrial design and design work.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's
and so
cool.
that's what I was like studying in school, and that was what I was interested in. And actually, so funnily enough, like I would always propose like coffee and tea based like projects within like when I was in that kind of setting, and then
Or
my
shadow.
yeah. And I was like, okay, it's because it gets me through like the day or whatever. I really like the
Hmm.
taste. But then during that time, I also, from the design background, I really appreciate intention a lot. And then I
Hmm.
was like, oh, like you're pouring water onto this thing. And I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing like how it worked, but I would watch people do it and I thought it was so cool. And I thought I would never be able to do any of it. Um, but then I think once I was out of school, I was working like one of my first like actual corporate jobs. I'd worked in like retail and food service before then, but then when I was working like a corporate role, I actually really hated it. I was like in a basement. My manager, I could just
In
tell
a
that
basement.
yeah, like it was like in a fucking basement. Oh, am I allowed to curse? I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're good.
Yeah, no, it was like in a fucking basement, and like it was for this plumbing supply company, and it was so strange because like I was doing like service design, and I don't know, that part was fine, but I would be forced to be in the office even if my supervisors weren't there, and if
Hmm.
I had work that like I'd already finished. Like it was just very strange structurally. So I just like really hated it. But the only thing in that office that interested me was the Chemex. They had one in the office, and
Oh.
I would just watch people brew with it in the morning, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. And we would taste coffees and things like that. And like I had already had kind of like the intro into specialty. I didn't really know like the background, but I also knew that coffee could taste different, and I was fascinated by that. So it was something where I actually got really depressed in that job, but then at the end, my very last day, I was like, I'm going to be a barista. And I had already applied and stuff like that. So my last day there was my first day at a coffee job. And I'd already started kind of like doing like nerdy research beforehand and like home brewing and like doing all this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And then so for a little while, I was working on the floor as a barista part-time and then doing other part-time design work just to kind of see where I wanted to go. But then I realized that everything that I wanted value-wise out of a design role was actually something that I found in coffee. And I think part of that is like being able to see big systems where like working on the floor, you are working like and you're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that people don't
Yeah.
see. But then if they go wrong, everything goes wrong and then the customer can like totally see it. But for the most part, they're like you could be doing dishes at the same time as like brewing a new pot of coffee at the same time as restocking something and like pulling a shot. Like there's like
Yeah.
20 bajillion.
It's the art of multitasking as being
Yeah,
like in the service industry specifically, but as a barista also.
it's so fun. But then I'm like, if something like I think the beauty of it, I was like, oh, that can all be happening while you're having this interaction with a customer, and they have
Hmm.
no idea. They
Yeah.
have no idea what's going on. They don't know, and it's like a show. And so I think seeing those systems, but then you're also creating like a product that ends up being able to serve someone else. Like I think it's very like communal and human centric, and that was
Hmm.
something that I really wanted out of like work and life. And I'm someone who values like community and community focused things
Yeah.
very heavily. So I think once I found that like alignment with the creative and social aspects, as well as like community focus, like local and national and international,
Hmm.
it's just, I feel like I can just constantly learn.
Yeah.
And I was just in it. Yeah.
So yeah, you really started from like really having a natural curiosity towards just like coffee on a simple level, and then you wanted to learn more. And now it's kind of transformed into what it is now, which is kind of awesome. It's also like little tidbits here and there. There was coffee constantly like edging you to get there. So I
Yeah.
really like that. So what led you to, how did you get about like building like tan brown coffee?
Um, Building it, I was I'm like, is it actually just revenge and angst and anger? Maybe. I think I actually noticed a lot of being like working on the floor. I was like one of the only like like Asian uh Asian people in my team or just person of color like on my team
Yeah.
very frequently. Actually, it wasn't always like that. When I first started in coffee, like I was very fortunate because my team was predominantly like people of color and people who just like hold marginalized identities, and that was something that I was like, wow, this is so nice, blah blah blah. But as like over time people get burnt out and they get tired and it's
Yeah, that's an understatement.
so people just leave, right? And so I noticed at a point in time where I was like, oh, I am like the only person of color on my team. And it was very present and it was very, and I realized too that I have never ever worked on a team with that many white people before. Just like even growing up, like it was very strange. I was like, I've never been in this environment. I never knew how pressing it feels.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think even being met with knowing that when and seeing like microaggressions in terms of like uh if I knew that I was going to get tipped if I was quiet and fast, right? Versus like having a bantering conversation with someone. And I love talking to people, right?
Right.
But people really just only cared if I was quiet and fast. So I became like the fastest barista on my team.
Mm,
And like I love workflow. It's really fun, but it was something where I noticed that and it was interesting. But I think that coupled with then like I was trying to do design work for like freelance design work for different shops and stuff like
hmm
that. And so for one of them, and they had their own roastery, like whatever, but they were asking for labels. But the first question I was asked when I met the owner was, where are you, the classic, where are you from? And
Or
then I was
I hate the
like,
question of what are you?
what are
What are you?
you? But it was like, though, where are you from? And then I was like, Atlanta. And then they was
They're like,
like, where
no,
are
really,
you
where are
really
you from?
from?
Yep.
Yeah, the classic. And I'm just like, bro, this is so played out and so old. And like we went back and forth, and I've answered this question so many times. It was like maybe 5 rounds of it before he said, you know what I'm trying to ask you. And I looked at him and I said, if you're trying to ask my ethnicity, I am
Right.
Korean American,
There you go.
but that has nothing to do with this conversation.
Right.
And then he met me with, oh, well, I lived in Singapore for some time. And I was like, I don't give two shits about that. That does not have anything to do with what this is. And
Oh
that
God.
actually fueled me with so much rage
Rage.
and anger. And so it was actually fascinating because that was the same time that I was participating in the digitician. So I was surrounded by a space that was so I was
Welcoming.
surrounded by a space that was so welcoming, that was so like empowering too, to be like, take
Mm,
up space in this
right.
industry, like you deserve a seat at the table,
Right.
or we're building our own fucking table, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
so we have that. And then I met with this man just being who he is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And making me feel small. Um, and I was like, I can't do this. I am going to build my own thing. Because if this man can have a roastery and he can not care about the coffee, not care about where it comes from,
Mm,
not care about the people who he's working with,
mm-hmm.
and has never worked in coffee in his life, then I can do it and I can do it better. And what does better look like a lot of times? And I'm like, better looks different to um
Right.
different people. Like, am I still small? Like, I'm a micro business. Like, that's fine. But I want to be able to build something that is not harming people in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think like
Yeah.
it's just been taking a lot of time and care. But I definitely have seen a lot of like my drive to do things. A lot of times I'm like, is this anger? Is this revenge?
I mean,
Maybe.
sometimes the best fuel is redemption. I think
Hmm.
like to kind of like combine all of that energy, I think a lot of what it is like, okay, so everybody has this stigma, they have this stereotype, and they have this depiction of what I'm supposed to be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a bunch of people that are like me, and we're just going to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
We're going to do it in a space that's safe and welcoming because you've experienced both ends. And like for somebody who's Arab American and has never seen Arabs as baristas or roasters or
Yeah.
even importers, it's um it's nice to know that other communities that are in the like the people of color and like the queer community making space so that other people who are looking for that community, because there are people that are looking for communities like yours, to feel like they have a place to kind of belong and not have to deal with the microaggressions or the discrimination in the workforce that people don't get to like really highlight.
Hmm.
I got so filled with rage, which is why I said that at the same time, because I was like, man, have I had the same exact conversations with women and men,
Yes.
mostly white people, where it's
Yes.
always the same fucking thing. It's like, okay, what are you? And then I play the game. I'm like, let me see if they'll actually know how to ask that question correctly. Never do.
Yeah.
And then it goes into, well, I'm Arab American. They're like, which Arab are you? I tell them, and they're like, oh, so it can go either two ways. It'd be like, oh, so like, are you related to Osama bin Laden?
Oh my God.
Or so do you have bombs?
Oh my
Does your
God.
family like have bombs in their house?
Yeah, I get the are you North or South Korean? And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
One of my best friends is Korean, so like her and I, we just talk about this shit all the time.
it's like
Um,
I'm like, y'all need to be more creative with your racism or like not
yeah.
at all. I mean, like that's like a joke. Just like don't
No,
do it.
yeah. I
But
mean, like that's sadly like the way of being a non-white m majority of like you kind of have to like build this steel shield around you that you get used to this kind of like um you just get used to this treatment. But like I just
yeah.
relate because it always, no matter what your ethnicity is
Hmm.
or your nationality, in America, it's so common if you are not a specific type of majority that you are basically asked these like preliminary discriminatory questions. And it's so fucking frustrating because
Yeah.
we,
Because it shouldn't be like I shouldn't have to show up in a space and you shouldn't have to show up in a space having
right,
your hyphenated identities be what precedes you,
right,
right? Like you should be like we should be able to show up and be able to just be like, "Oh, I am a coffee professional," or "I am
exactly.
like I am who I am," and no one have to ask questions about it.
Yeah.
Like I should not only be celebrated during May, right? Well,
Hmm.
like there are things where I look at it and I'm just like uh, I don't want to just be seen as a good Asian like coffee professional. I want to be seen as a good coffee professional, right?
Right, period.
Like that's it.
Yeah, honestly. So where is Tan Brown Coffee now? Like, how did you build that actually? Like, well, we got the origin story. So, like,
Yeah.
where did it get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm finally going to start the motion of like building this business for people and myself?
Yeah. So I originally started with a friend and he eventually like left because he wanted to pursue music and it was just not like his first thing, which I would totally
Right.
respect, and so we're on good terms. But we talked and we shared a meal and we are like, let's do this thing. And I was like, great. I had like half a bag of coffee left over from like a project and I was like, we're just gonna start because I had taken a lot of the money, like I had saved for a really long time for just like a small baby roaster. And I was like, we're just
Uh,
gonna do this. It was like a Quest M6, so slightly bigger than the Quest M3. So not like a half pound like capacity,
yeah.
but it's just like a pound roast. We're just I set it up in my apartment to where the venting went out the window, and I was like, we're
I
just gonna
love
do
that.
it, right? And I was actually talking to someone about this the other day too, because I was like, I realized that I saved so much money in the beginning because I knew how to do design work and logo like work and branding, and I've done background and like social
Yeah.
media stuff before, and I think that people don't realize how much money like goes into like the marketing side of things, unfortunately, right? Like I really wish that aesthetics and things like that were not as big of a barrier
Yeah.
to getting into something, but like I also know that having a reputable brand, whatever that may be, like ends up allowing people to come through and like being able to express like what you're trying to express, I guess. And so something that I realized, I was like, oh, I saved so much money because I put so much time into
Yeah.
like doing all of it myself, and I was exhausted. But I was like, I'll be able to figure this out later. So went with something that ended up like working. We came up with the name kind of like on the fly. We were talking. And it was like a how we want this to feel, right? And we were coming up with different like, oh yeah, we want it to feel like warm and welcoming and playful and
Yeah.
nostalgic and like those types of things. And then we were like, what are colors that like kind of reminisce that type of thing? And we were like, we like these like soft like primary colors, but we also like maybe tan, maybe brown. And then we like looked at each other, we were like tan
Tan
brown.
Brown.
And we were like, wait, we're tan and brown. Coffee's tan and brown.
I love
This
that.
works. Like this works. And also it's just like to pay homage to the fact that like coffee, we're focusing on Asian coffee, and that's like what the producers look like as well. So I don't know. We thought it was funny. It was just like funny. So we were just like, let's do it. But yeah, a lot of things up front and then just starting slowly. Started with like a website and selling just like retail very slowly. And then over time just expanded into like pop-ups and things like that, like out
Mhm.
of shops that I had like worked at before, working with different friends, who also like Atlanta has a really big like pop-up scene, whether it be food or drink, which I really, really love because I think
That's cool.
like the local food and bev people, they like
Mhm.
bring so much vibrancy to the cities. And so because of that, we would just like pop up with people and it'd be a lot of fun. And yeah, and so that's like grown steadily. I think we're entering our is this entering the third year? Yeah, entering year two, three? I don't know actually, but like, but it's definitely not something where, I guess typically like we've had like you know how like there's coffee companies who just like they start and they have hella investors, and
Yeah.
then that was something that I realized too. I didn't realize that so many companies like had. I mean, I guess I knew, but like that wasn't something that like crosses my mind all the time because
Yeah.
I'm not a business person first. I am a I'm a I'm a coffee person and like I don't have money for that,
Right.
right? So I was just like, I'm gonna build something and see if it works, rather than be like, I have a proof of concept of this thing and you should invest in me and here's the reason why, like blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And
Business
then
plan and everything.
yeah, I was like, let's build something sustainable, and something that I won't hate over time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we did our first like crowdfunding kind of campaign back in June-ish, but that was for like a roaster. And I got the roaster, which makes me happy, and we just recently put it into a space. But it's a baby roaster. It roasts like 10 pounds, but it's real cute. It's the artisan XE, but it made me really happy and I felt so supported by community. But even like seeing that we've been able to like grow that much and then also
Hmm.
like working again just like doing a ton like a lot of pop-ups uh and then working with like people to do like wholesale things. I think what's been really nice is being able to work with people who like I want to be able to work with. And I think I've learned a lot too of like how to set certain boundaries with people and also like know like what I want in terms of like collaboration.
Yeah, like who you want to choose to one represent your brand, and then two
Right.
you want to sustain like have a sustaining relationship with, because that as being a roaster also who works a lot of the time mostly wholesale, I get so much gratification from that kind of relationship because you're watching that business grow, especially if they're like starting out. It's like almost like
Yeah.
you're just watching a little bud turn into a
Yeah.
little flower.
It's so cute. And so like for example, I think one of my like wholesale accounts that I have now, it's for just like a small shop down here. They just opened like kind of later 2023 and I had been talking
Yeah.
to them about like for around like a year
Mhm.
before they opened, but working with them has been so cool because I see that how they're growing,
Yeah.
but I also really love how much attention to detail and care and to like their community like that they bring, and I think being a part of that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
uh so yeah, that's always really fun.
So you were talking before about competitions. Do you compete then also?
Okay, so I competed in Brewers Cup in 2023. Yeah, so last year I competed in a Brewers Cup, and
Mhm.
that was like my first time competing.
How was
Um,
that?
I I think
I
it's
wish it.
really it's a complex answer. It was hard.
Yeah.
I think I didn't realize because before then I had just been judging and part of the latte art committee, which is really funny because I know nothing about latte art. I'm really bad at it, but part of the committee and because there's a lot of really good people there and it was fun and learning how to judge and stuff like that has been really nice. But I think from being on that side, from switching from that side of competition to then being the one who is in front of things,
Uh-huh.
um, it was really challenging and a little stressful.
Yeah.
So I think with Brewers Cup, I really, really love that competition. And it's very like pointed, but I think something that was so clear to me at that point, I was like, oh, you need to have money to do well at these competitions, money, resource, time, like all this stuff because people roll in with these expensive coffees. They roll in with teams like
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
coaches,
Hmm.
right? That was something that I didn't realize. But then
That's crazy. Coaches?
yeah.
Whoa, what the
So
fuck?
like
This isn't the fucking
backstage,
Olympics, dude.
yeah, like people have coaches, they have teams, they have all these things. And
That's a bit.
rarely do people compete independently, right?
That's
So
crazy.
yeah. So it
That's
was
also weird.
it's
That's
really weird. It's so like jarring, and I felt really
I
discouraged
was
when
gonna
I
say.
did it. But I also felt really like empowered in different ways, mostly
Hmm.
because the my journey competing was so crazy, I guess, because I had found out well, I had applied to it and then I found out that I didn't get into the weighted like lottery system like an hour and a half before they open registration. I was really sad. They only had 7 slots. They filled up really quickly. Then I was like, okay, so I'm gonna be on a wait list. I had to like advocate to be like, hey, there needs to be a wait list for this, blah, blah, blah. So they opened one, then I was like one of the last people to get on it. But that was maybe 3 weeks before the competition date, which is for a qualifying competition, right? During that time, I had to source my coffee, find a profile to roast it, practice brewing it, and then like come up with like a speech and like competition kind of thing, and also continue to practice compulsory, which is like a part of the brewing competition that people don't see.
Oh.
Um, yeah, and that's why I also really like Brewers Cup because there is a compulsory level that kind of evens the playing field in some ways, where everyone's given the same coffee. You're given a time limit to dial in that coffee to the best of your ability. The coffee always has something like missing, not necessarily like defects or anything, but like something like it might taste a little empty. It might need a little body. It might need a little bit more like acidity. It
Oh,
might
so they manipulate the roast.
somewhat, and it's always a wash coffee, but you have like I think it's 45 minutes total, 38 minutes of dial-in time, 7 minutes of performance time. No one's watching you. It's just the 7 minutes to complete 3 brews, 3 separate brews, pour them into cups, send them off to the judges, and they're judged blindly.
So
Um,
do you do the actual like showmanship part first and then you do the compulsory like last, or is this like
it
you
just
got to do
depends.
all of it?
You just have to do all of it, but the compulsory part is a separate like it's separate part of the competition. So then you
Oh,
have
so they're both then.
yeah, so you do both of them. So they're on different days of the competition. So you might do compulsory one day and then you do what they call open service the next day or vice versa. And
That's
so it it's wild. So I had to do all of that, but then at the same time, I was coaching my friend who has never worked on a bar before for barista, right?
oh God.
And that was like,
But stress, time,
mhm.
stress,
Yeah,
time.
it was a lot of stress during that time because we had like a month to prep. But
Mm.
I think through that I was like, okay, like what's going on? Like I ended up sourcing coffee from Haya's partner, Camilo.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I drove all the
That's
way up.
funny.
I drove to New Jersey and I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this coffee and then I'm gonna drive back.
That's fucking commitment, dude.
It is, but I had like this
Jesus.
like here in my mind, the logic was, yo, shipping is gonna take a while. It's
That's
gonna be
true.
faster for me to drive up than drive back down,
How
and
long
like
was the drive?
it's 13 hours. Um,
They
but
said,
I
oh,
was
I might as well just drive
yeah, I mean
13 hours
it
casually.
13 hours, but then also while I was up there, I had never used an Akawa before, but I knew that if I
Oh,
did, then I could use one down here and the roast profiles that I set up would be consistent. So I learned
so
how,
invested in the story. I just, I'm
yeah,
just like,
so
okay, so what's next?
I went up there and then I learned how to use an Ikawa from some at Coffee Project and then came back down and
Yeah.
like I had like two different profiles because I used two different coffees for that performance and then I drove back down and that was all like a 24 to 48 hour kind of trip. But I was like, that's quicker than shipping. And then I
Where were
came
you on
back.
the timeline of those 3 weeks when you drove up to New Jersey?
That was I think the either the beginning or the middle of the first week. And then yeah, just everything else was like prep, prep, prep. And then I got there and it was like jarring and I was so stressed,
Oh no.
but uh I ended up qualifying to go to nationals, which made me
Holy.
really excited. Yeah, I placed seventh, I think, at my yeah, I placed seventh at my qualifier, which was really shocking. There were like 24 people who competed. And it
Wow.
was my first time competing, and I almost puked because I was like, what the heck?
That's totally valid.
And when I was there, I think it was overwhelming because I didn't have like I was so intimidated by the fact that I didn't have the same amount of support that other people had. I
Wait, so did you
also
only go alone? Like you didn't bring anyone with you?
I like we had like glitter cat like teams and stuff like that, but I didn't see like the person who was helping me until
Yeah.
I got there. And then it was literally just like, oh, she's gonna help taste like my coffee, and then we're gonna get notes down. Because
Mm.
for brewers, you have to have notes like about like acidity, body balance,
Yeah.
aftertaste, like all that stuff from hot to cold for
Nice.
like aroma, like for the coffee, right? So it's a lot of like notes and things, but I didn't really do a lot of that or finalize my recipe until I got there. Which was kind of common for competition, but I had to switch so many things that my brain was just like, what's going on? But yeah, I was joking with one of my friends who was there, and I was like, my only goal is to make sure that the people who are back here, who are mostly cis white men, think that I can't brew coffee. Like that is my only goal because it's less intimidating that way because they felt like so like into like I don't know, had a weird energy with each other that I
Yeah.
was like, they don't see me as someone who can brew. So I'm just gonna step back and I'm gonna pretend like I don't know anything.
So if that was your friend's experience, do you feel like when you were there that you were also like there's like some kind of animosity with like that kind
Oh,
of like
no,
thing?
that's what I was telling my friend that
Oh
like I
shit, so
wanted
that
to
was
do.
your
Yeah, yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah, that was my experience. And then when I was there, it was like it was very strange, the energy in the space. But I also think that it was attributed to like a lot of us were not used to elevation there because we did the competition in Denver. So that actually changes so much
Yeah.
about brewing and it
Hmm.
changes so much about coffee. It was very like strange, I think. But yeah, I mean it was fun. I completed the whole like qualifiers, nationals,
Yeah.
but afterward I was like I need to take a break for a while because it definitely drained me like mentally, emotionally, financially, like all this stuff and I was just like
Oh
I'm not
shit, we didn't even talk about that. So I'm guessing you had to pay to participate.
Yeah, and I did like crowdfunding, which was really, really helpful. But it's like a lot of like you put a lot of yourself into trying to find sponsors or trying to find like support. And like I think something that people don't think about when competing independently, it's like
Right.
you're covering all of those costs
Yeah.
basically, and it's not from a company. Whereas company can look at it and be like, oh, this is part of marketing, right? Or like this is part of travel that's already like built in to like something that we already have. But yeah, it was a lot.
I was gonna ask if it's cool to just shoot a number around how much you think you spent for that.
Oh, probably around like $7,000, I think. Yeah. And I think that
Oh, oh, my heart.
yeah.
Oh
And
my,
it was some
on your own too? Did you gain any sponsors after that?
I not, I had like some sponsorship, like Ware's sponsorship.
Yeah.
I also
Jesus.
did do a crowdfunding, so it did like it did make that amount a little bit less, but I think during that time, like the total, that would be the total amount, including like lodging, including travel, like, yeah, lodging, travel, like food, like practice costs, like uh other wares that like I couldn't get like either a discount or
Yeah.
like, and even
Sweet.
coffee, like coffee's so expensive. I didn't use a super expensive coffee for anything really, but it was just
So,
it was a lot.
do you feel like after obviously placing for nationals, do you think that all of that, because you went through a lot to like get to that point, do you feel
Yeah.
like all of it was worth it?
I think in some ways, yes, because part of my reasoning for competition was not to do like perfectly or well. There's no
Mm,
way to do that in your first year.
yeah.
Also, like not having the resources, but I learned a lot. And I think my goal for a lot of the things that I do within coffee, because Atlanta is a very under-resourced coffee community and city, which sounds
Mm,
really weird because we have a lot of like really passionate baristas, really passionate professionals. I think part of like what I wanted to do and my goals for competing were to gain a lot of those skills
yeah.
and bring them back. So if anyone else wanted to compete, I could coach. My goal for a lot of things in terms of like competition, like it's great like in some ways for I don't know, community building in some
Yeah.
ways. Like I'm not opposed to it because honestly like it allows people to grow professionally in visibility. And there needs to
Yeah.
be a lot more people who have avenues of opportunity within the competition space that are not just cis men or cis white men, like I think it just needs to change, and whether that be through
Yeah.
judging, which is a more financially sound kind of option for
Right.
people, because that is one that if someone gets to head judge level or like in that range, then potential like they would get a stipend for um like judging, right?
Yeah.
Also judges make competitions. Basically, if you didn't have any judges, you would not have a competition. And a lot of people have to be very competent in their skills to be able to do that. But yeah, whether it be judging or whether someone is interested in competing, there needs to be resources that
Right.
they can use, right? So if someone here like needed a coach for something, and didn't have that, I wanted to be able to be like that resource for someone because I
Mhm.
didn't have it. So it's just out here trying to make the space that I'm in a little bit better, like if someone needed it.
Wow. Yeah, that seems like okay, so since we're still on this like chronological train, you placed seventh and then you qualified for nationals. Did you go to nationals?
I did go to nationals and I placed 17th, I think, I don't remember out of how many, but it was top 20, which made me really happy.
Yeah, honestly. I'd be like, that'd
Yeah.
be for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like first year, like I was not expecting anything. I also competed with uh an Asian coffee, which made me really happy too. That it just like it scored just as well as a lot of other really
Hey,
fancy and
that's
expensive coffees.
amazing.
Yeah.
So would you obviously compete again?
I think I would only compete if I had resources
That's
or
totally
like
valid though. After everything you
uh
went through,
budget set in place because
right.
I was like I don't want I think I was stressed because I'm like, oh, I had to roast my own coffee. I had to source it. I had to get all my wares. I had to make like a managing schedule of like when I was gonna do X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
And so it felt like a lot. So I might compete again. I might not. We'll see.
I mean, it sounded like a lot.
It was a lot.
I was like, that sounded like a lot.
I was like, oh my
Jeez.
gosh, how can I do this? But I was glad that I did go through that at the time.
No, I feel like especially um was that like your first real exposure to like the coffee community? Like in a scheme like that? Or
Mm,
have you gone to like expo or whatever?
Yeah, so I'd been to Expo before. I think I had plugged pretty deeply into like the coffee community very
Mm,
parasocially before then.
yeah,
So during like again more like lockdown times and
yeah,
quarantine times, did a lot of like meetups with Asian coffee professionals because or like I held space for a bunch of people and did like this thing like called Coffee Asians where we tried to uh like hold a safe space because that was when a lot of like hate crimes were happening. And
yeah,
I was
shit.
wanting to make sure that people felt okay. And if not,
Right.
they had like a space to share. And so I
Yeah,
feel like I met a lot of people through that. And then when I went to Expo, I met even more people. And then just like I keep meeting people, I think, through the internet, which is a very interesting concept, I think, through coffee.
yeah.
Um, but it's nice. I really enjoy it.
It's everybody is now interconnected in some way or like
Hmm.
fashion, but I mean, it sounds like, I mean, like every fabric of your story seems like it's always been connected to coffee anyway. So, um, with going back to Tan Brown, where do you see Tan Brown going now? Like, do you have any like hope for it to turn into like a shop, or like, is there something else that you're wanting to like come out of it? Like,
I think it'd be interesting if it became a shop, but I know it costs so much.
yeah.
I think at the end of the day, like I want to be able to like my goals, I think coming up is more just hosting more educational kind of sessions.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
then also just continuing to roast coffee. It makes me happy to be able to roast coffee.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, education and then maybe like a space if something magical happens, that'd be
yeah.
really, really cool. Because I miss working in a shop and I miss
Yeah.
slinging beans and I miss like I miss volume. That's what I miss. Because I mean I get some of it with pop-ups, but it's a little bit different. I also feel like I perform a little bit more when I'm doing pop-ups because I have to be like I feel like I have to be on,
Right.
right? which
Right.
is which is nice because I feel like in some ways like I don't get that in a shop setting as much. But then I also really like being able to turn off my brain and just do things.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I have those same like moments too where I'm just like sometimes I just want to like go on autopilot and let my body kind of do what it remembers. Because I
Yeah.
started as a barista like when I was 18, 19, and now I'm turning 28 soon, so it's kind of like 10 years of doing this shit. It's kind of
Yep.
wild. But yeah, no. Wow, that's so interesting. So, I guess like to get a little personal,
Yeah.
when you wanted to start like Tan Brown in the first place or like pursue coffee, how did like did you have like a lot of support from family and friends?
Mm, uh I don't know if it was like active support. I think
Yeah.
it's just more like, oh, you're doing that. What are you doing? Right? And then I'm like, I'll show you in a few, like in a while, and then you'll get it, I guess.
Mm,
So I don't know. Like, I guess support is like a weird concept. So it's like not like, oh, don't do that, blah blah blah. I
mm,
think mostly when I switched into coffee as like a career, my parents were like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like
yeah.
why would you go to school for this other thing
Mm,
and then want to just like work in this industry?"
yeah.
And I know that it's from a place of care. I know that it's from a place of like wanting me to be okay,
Mm,
but I think at the end of the day, it's still a little bit confusing as to like
yeah.
why. Uh, but uh, I don't know whether or not I have like active support in different ways. I feel really held by the people who I have been able to meet. So I did feel
Mm,
supported from a lot of like coffee people switching
yeah.
to like different things. It's been fun.
Mm. Yeah, I was asking that more out of curiosity because I know that you mentioned that you are Korean American. So I was just curious to, are your parents immigrants?
No, I'm actually adopted.
Well,
So,
fucking
yeah.
shit. Well,
So it's not something that I talk about very much
that's
anymore.
fair.
Um, just because I don't have to be in spaces like with my parents, so I don't
Mm,
and I don't have like a super close relationship with them either. So it's something where I'm not like shy to talk about it. It's not super like vulnerable for me, but it's just something that I don't actively like bring up. And I think a lot of the times I've realized like when I mention it in spaces, it sometimes people look at it and they're like, "Oh, well, that means you don't have like validity as like
oh, I
this
see. I see
this
where you're going.
person."
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, actually, I've had similar experiences, and I feel like I do resonate very heavily with a lot of
Mm,
second gen Korean Americans in different ways, like trying to seek out culture, trying to seek out the
yeah.
language, like
Mm,
I think a lack of connection, being in between different things, like, and I don't feel completely comfortable all the time with like big groups of like adoptees or like big groups of fully Korean people. Like, so I
yeah.
feel like very in between a lot of the times. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No. Like my favorite thing to talk, like this isn't trying to sound weird, but like as somebody who is a first gen, like my favorite space of people are the first gens and second gens. Like
Yes.
we just know, we get it. And it's
Yeah.
so validating to meet other people who are constantly like in search of a community space because we
Mm,
can't coexist in one or the other.
right.
I have many like first or second gen friends where we have these like really great conversations and like it's crazy because it doesn't matter if you were born here, if you were born there, if you speak the language or if you don't. We all get labeled the same and we all somehow figure out to have the same kinds of experiences and
Yeah.
different nuances. Because I have like friends that are Jordanian American that are constantly like in search of their Arab identity
Yeah.
and also struggling living here. And then I have my Korean American friend who is first generation and she still struggles with conforming a lot to the Korean culture and identity as well. And
Oh
like
my
I
gosh.
also like as a queer Arab person also just it's all intermingled and it's great to find community in that sense. So it's like when I get to find other people
Yeah.
who are
And
also
then
like
queerness adds like another level to
there,
it
yep.
too, where you're just like, damn, like what? What's going on? Right?
No,
Like,
honestly, it's like cool. I guess like I didn't need my life to be more complicated.
yeah. But yet, here we are.
Literally, it's fucking exhausting. So I have a segment on my show.
Hmm.
I don't know if you listened to the other episodes.
I have.
Great. So then hopefully you're prepared. Uh, there's a segment on the show every fucking episode. It kind of started last season where the whole premise of the show is to talk about controversy or talk about a subject that you're passionate about that feels needs to be highlighted that doesn't get talked enough about. So now we're bringing it up. This is the hot take. So, what is your hot take?
Oh man, I knew that this was coming and I am not prepared. Okay, let's think of a hot take.
Let's think. This is a you thing.
I know.
I have
I
too
was
many hot
like,
takes.
I have a lot of hot takes, but I actually don't know if they're hot takes or just true. I'm just kidding. But I have to think on this one for a second. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be coffee related.
Nope. Honestly, I feel like half the time it goes kind of AWOL, but uh regardless, I think that this content is for most anybody who's trying to find and relate to experiences in the workplace. We just happen to be coffee related people, so that's why we kind of emphasize coffee. But for the most part, we go off topic talking about these kind of things all the time. So if you want to bring up something that's like, hey, this is something that I've been wishing somebody would fucking talk about that doesn't get talked about enough, then by all means, I am just a platform.
Dang. Oh gosh. Wow, I totally blanked out. I should have prepared more.
It's okay.
Um, and I think I had a really good one, but I don't remember what it is now. Oh, I
There you
think that
go.
I think that uh this might be a really hot take. Maybe
Let's
it's not
go.
that hot take. I think home brewers and enthusiasts need to stop giving incorrect advice and stop picking on people who work in shops.
Oh, wow, 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 wow. I really
Yeah.
like that one actually. Like the the coffee bro mentality.
Yeah, coffee bro mentality just needs to stop. I think something that I really like, I get so upset about is when I see coffee bros like commenting on different things like in shop settings or like if they go to somewhere it's like I can always make this better.
Yeah, then what the
Then
fuck
just
is he
don't
doing
go
here,
to the
bro?
shop. Like, what is your intention for going to the shop? Or
Mm,
like them having like this whole setup and basically being like, oh, you spritz this and then you put this in this like $1,000 grinder and then you
yeah, it's
have to
fucking wild.
use like 10, 15 different puck prep things and then you put a screen on it and a filter on it and then you put it in your machine and then your shot channels anyway. Like I look at that and I'm like I just I don't think you understand that that would not work in volume. It
Right,
also then you saying, "Oh, I can make a better quality whatever at home." I'm like, "Okay, then you stay at home and do that." The reason why people go to shops is to get to know like baristas. Like that's the start of someone's day. They might go for
right.
experience. They might go for something that brings them nostalgia. It's something that is more care based. Like I think people removing empathy from coffee and community from coffee is inherently wrong.
Yeah, honestly, that's a good one. I feel like uh where do I start? Like when you brought up like how people come into the shop and they're like, "Well, I could do this." My favorite question is like, "You don't have an Ethiopian natural?" I'm
Oh
like,
my gosh.
how many? Like, I'm like, bro, there's fucking countries outside of Ethiopia that make bomb ass coffee. There are people who will
Yeah.
pick up the bags, and I watch this happen because our retail is right by our counter. They'll literally pick up the bag and be like, "Yeah, that doesn't sound like it tastes good."
Oh, I also have another one.
Go ahead.
I think that a lot of people who brew at home are
Mm,
calibrated to under extracted coffee.
I
I
agree with
think,
this.
yeah, I think that there's so, and I think a lot of people don't, and that's why I think when new brewers come out onto the market, I'm always like, okay, great, and like fast flow, fast flow, fast flow, okay, great, but so many people don't know how to use it and under
Right.
extract their coffee. And I
Yeah.
think the metric for things where they think that every coffee should taste bright and acidic, I'm like, that is not factual. And some coffees shine differently, like
Right.
when they have more contact time with water. But I think there's not enough brew theory and coffee theory and extraction theory being like shared in those
Right.
spaces. And
I
so
feel like a
people
lot
just
of it is just for
palate
the
bad.
aesthetic, bro. Like a lot of the time, like people just want to get into coffee for the aesthetic of how that looks. Because
Yeah,
like everybody who doesn't know shit about coffee is obvious like gravitated towards like the oohs and the ahs of like watching the coffee flow through the drip and then obviously doing the swirl of like adding the water and then the timing and then the weighing. You look like you're like bougie as fuck doing a pour over when half the time people don't understand what kind of temperature of water,
right,
kind of water, how
right.
fine or coarse is the grind. Or if they do, they scrutinize anyone else who changes the recipe. When there are different recipes for pour overs, people lose their fucking shit.
Yeah, or even people using competition recipes from day-to-day things where that was
Mm,
not intended for that like for a coffee you might be using at home.
right,
Or like it honestly changes day by day. You're never going to get the same kind of
right,
results as someone crafted that recipe for that specific time for a
exactly.
purpose. So I think people taking things out of context. And then but yeah, I think that's a big one where I'm just like people don't understand or like they're calibrated to just like way too acidic and under extracted coffee and they think it's normal. And so I think it ends up writing out a bunch of other coffees that are beautiful in their own
Hmm.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like for me when I started my coffee journey, like I obviously had no good ideas of what different regions tasted like until like my mentor kind of sat me down and was like, "We're gonna try coffees like every day from different regions." And I was like, "Wow, this is really interesting. Cool." And then I kind of discovered through repetition of obviously different beans varietals, processes, and farmers how much I absolutely love Congolese coffee. Congolese
Oh,
coffee tends to be some
yes.
of my favorite coffee. But I would have never known that.
Beautiful.
if I hadn't like kind of like constantly tried, if I had just stuck with the idea of like, I'm gonna have an Ethiopian natural every day and I'm not gonna try anything else or a
Yeah.
Colombia washed or, like obviously there's more to,
Even Oh, sorry. I
no,
was
I
like,
was just gonna
even
say more to
even
it.
now with a lot of people drinking more, or I guess more like anaerobic or
Yeah.
co-ferments or all these things, I think like those are not bad things to have, but I think trying different coffees and more standard coffees from regions and like understanding context that there's places that cannot do the same kind of processing
Yeah.
methods because of laws. Like I
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like that then like allows us to contextually appreciate things. I think when
Yeah.
people are like, I don't understand why this country can't do this kind of co-ferment, blah 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 blah, like we should be crafting it like this way, that'd be so
Mm,
exotic. I'm like, well, the reason why Colombia can do all those processing methods is because they had laws lifted in 2019, right?
yeah.
So they've been able to dive into like research, and that's like really, really awesome. But there's a lot of countries that are like war sieged or whatever,
Yeah.
and there's
Exactly.
a lot of places that like have really strong tariffs on stuff and a lot of governmental
Yeah.
control, and I think people forget about that. Especially when it comes to just like tasting different things. And I'm like,
Mm,
just appreciate a lot of coffees for what they are. And then know, and you can have your bias and preferences, right? Like people
mm,
are entitled to like what they like and what they don't like.
yeah.
Um, but I think keeping an open mind allows us to explore a little bit more and then also not become so palate like calibrated to one end of the
Yeah.
spectrum.
That's a really good way to describe that. Palette calibrated. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I want to shift perfectly and transition beautifully into the producers you work with.
Ooh.
I would love to learn more about what kind of producers you work with.
Yeah. So I think being small, it's really hard to like
Mm,
do like direct kind of
right.
things.
Yeah.
So I still go through like the general like I don't know, like genuine origin stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
think one of the coffees that makes me really excited is we have a coffee from Myanmar. And that coffee is from the Shui Tong 2 cooperative,
Mm,
which is in the southern Shan region of Myanmar.
mm,
And I think something that I really like about that specific co-op, and I got it through Atlas Coffee, but
yeah.
they work pretty directly with them. I think like watching and knowing that that specific cooperative like has like representatives from each of the villages there, they come together to figure out like what uh will help grow like their like communities and their
Yeah.
spaces.
Oh,
Something that I
love
really
it.
love about Myanmar coffee specifically is like, coffee is a colonial product,
Yeah.
right? Like it is something that it is not the areas where it's supposed to be, it's not supposed to be there, right? Unless it's indigenous to that space. But most of the
Mm,
coffee has been brought over by some like colonial force. So in Myanmar, a lot of the crops were really, really bad, right?
mm.
Until around like 2014.
Oh, that's
Um,
Lisa.
2014, they had like a processing training, like Skillshare kind of thing with some people from like a quality thing. I don't remember what the
Yeah.
org was, but they had like one processing training, but something that they continued to do was they took that and then built upon it. And I would say that Myanmar has some of the most like skilled uh skilled producers who do natural processing.
Mm,
Like, uh, if you look at some of the pictures of Myanmar natural processed coffees,
mm.
they're like bright red cherries. The bag that I have is very much like if I open it, it smells like a natural, but there's not a lot of color variation in the green. So it
Oh,
looks
wow.
like it could be a wash. Like it's a very, very
Wow.
beautiful coffee. And I think it shows a lot about resilience. And like it also shows a lot like resilience where you don't have to be resilient, where you shouldn't
Yeah.
have to be, but you're taking what you're given and
Mm,
growing it. And I think a lot of it has to do with being driven by the people in your space and like because it is like a co-op, right?
yeah.
So that's something that I really, really enjoy.
That's fucking awesome. You were talking about something. We had Ruth on an episode from Artisan Imports.
Mm.
She works mostly with like Rwanda and like some Ethiopian producers, all women, amazing coffees. But she was also talking about how when she went to Rwanda, that was a lot of like the co-ops that she was kind of like being introduced to, where they were like selective representatives from different parts of their communities, and they all like came together to kind of dictate, okay, so what should we do with like obviously financial, like the money aspect.
Yeah, it's like where does this go? Does this
Hmm.
support us like health wise?
Yeah.
Like how does this yeah, and I
But what I loved the most from that episode is she said that there's actual studies. Obviously, I don't have the data right in front of me, but she said that there are studies that if you invest in the women of the communities, they will have a higher rate of benefiting their community versus a man making
I
the
see
decision
that.
because of the priorities being really different. Obviously, women care more for the collective and in their community and the children versus men can be like ego driven and
Ego
brand and
driven.
power driven. So it's like
Yeah.
I love hearing that kind of stuff like from different um producers that are trying to put the people first versus just
Mm.
the individual like capitalist mindset.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too, though, in terms of the fact that a lot of coffee producing regions, a lot of the most like co-op focused or community focused
Yeah.
producers are women, or like there's a lot of like women
Hmm.
grown coffee.
Yeah. I'm proud to say that I do all of our coffee purchasing also for the place that I work, and we only source from women owned and women produced. That was my
Wow.
incentive, and I obviously have
Mm.
a minority and people and queer driven podcast. So like a lot of what I want to do is bring more of that representation and inclusivity and
Yeah.
collective to the coffee community and the coffee world. And it starts a lot from the consumer's end. It starts a lot from the community end. It comes from a lot of the implementing and
Mm.
systemic issues. So it's like a lot of it from where this podcast is coming from is just highlighting great voices and great people and giving recognition where it's due, along with showcasing like the work that they do for the purpose of why I started the podcast, which was to meet these amazing people, to build a community, and to like showcase the power of the people and the
Hell
women
yeah.
and the queer people and the
Hell
colors
yeah.
and the beautiful people of color as well. So yeah, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Just wow.
Wow.
Well, do you have any questions for me?
Oh my.
Sorry, I'm a pretty direct person.
No, I know. I understand that. I can also be pretty direct, which I like a lot more because I think, yeah, recently I've just been like really confused when people are very indirect, so it's good.
Yeah, I can't do it. I'm just like, just tell me what you want. Tell me what you're asking for.
I'm
I
like, my brain is too spicy for this.
no, I'm just saying that like I think what I lacked in the last season was I definitely didn't have the interaction of the conversation from both ends. And I kind
Mm,
of want to integrate that more, that it's like, okay, cool.
yeah.
I obviously like put your whole life on the platter right here. So it's like you're free to like ask me anything you'd like to know.
Yeah, I think
Also not God,
for
so
for you, like what are things that you want more of within the coffee industry?
are you asking me my hot take?
Yeah,
Or
sure. Sure. Or
um
yeah, things that aren't talked about or just things that you dream of. So hot take and then maybe dreams.
I genuinely wish there were more Arab people. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I feel like if there's anything that's among many other ethnicities, I feel like Arab people are so underrepresented.
That's very true.
Underrepresented, underrepresented in the coffee community.
Mm,
Like, bro, I don't think you understand how hard. One, I research the people I bring on the show. Yeah,
right.
I have barely found any Arab people.
That's so interesting too, because a lot of like Arab countries, like coffee is like the
Yes.
drink of
Uh-huh.
choice. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
no. I mean, like honestly, if you think of the story of coffee,
yeah,
where and
yeah,
how it the obviously the beans originated from Ethiopia, but We had a Sufi monk bring back the
Right.
coffee to Yemen and created the beverage. So it's like that's something I think somebody also asked me this last season where they were just like, okay, so what do you like, what are your goals? Right. And I went to SCA's like roasters retreat in 2022. Yeah. And I remember meeting somebody and I was like, I would love, and this is really outlandish and ambitious to bring in more Yemeni coffees. I would love to meet Yemeni producers. I would love to
Yeah.
kind of really build that system up because one, it is also war driven and it's really
Yeah.
hard and dangerous to get coffee out of Yemen. But it was like the closest thing that I felt like I had a connection to my roots. Obviously, my country is not near. I might, I'm so good at geography.
What
Uh,
what is your country?
Iraqi. So I'm from Iraq.
Uh-uh.
So it's not too far off, but
Yeah.
I was confusing Kuwait and yeah. Anyways, um, but yeah, I just wanted to like find connection in the work that I do. Like all of my work that I ever do, I
Mm.
need to find some sense of myself in there where there's passion,
Hmm.
there's a drive, there's a clear lined goal for me to find alignment with it. It's not just me like pumping out shit to bring money home. It's
Yes.
finding like fulfillment through my life's work. I'm just not one of those people that can like go to work and then turn off and go home. Like I'm just never been one of those people. So, like for me, when it came down to like what would I like to do when I got into coffee, I was like, I found a love for Yemeni coffees. I think they're delicate. I think they're beautiful. I think they have obviously very similar traits to Ethiopian coffees, but I think that they're extremely underrepresented and they do not have as much resource to better their
Hmm.
coffees. And they tend to be a lot more expensive because of how hard it is to get in the States. But going out of the coffee world and what I'm doing here is I would love to find more Arab people who want to have representation and find community. I would
Yeah.
also love to, and I remember talking to Ken at one point about this off air where I was like, they suggested having like a collective from Beans Without Boundaries. And I think that would be an amazing
Oh,
thing to kind of like build a whole community from my podcast where we're just kind of like all looking out for each other,
yeah.
which sounds a little bit like utopian there. But
We can dream.
yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like I love the people I've met so far on this journey. And I think that
Oh,
it would be great to be able to open arms towards finding my people and finding more queer Arab people. And I am grateful that I have like a really awesome lineup of people who are going to come on the show this season. But yeah, it sucks that I can't seem to find Arab people being represented in the coffee world as easily as it is to find a majority of one or the other, you know?
yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think also with you doing more of this and you being the person who's visible, there are people out there who will come to you as well. So
That's dope.
I'm sure it'll grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, of course. I tend to be an open book. I'm just like not really good with like generic questions. Because I'm so direct driven, I'm like, you
Oh
gotta
yeah, you gotta tap in,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's not the how's the weather today? How's your day?
Oh, bro, I
Right?
can't
Or
fucking
like it
do small talk at all. Like if somebody was to come up, how was your day?
I'm like, do you want to hear how my entire day was?
Just like
No.
that's what I will say though. That's what made me not the best barista. I slay slinging on fucking
Me
bar.
too.
Throw me on the bar in peak, in rush, whatever. You get me behind like POS and you want me to be nice and warm to you. I'm sorry. I ain't the bitch. I'm not the girl. I'm not the person. I'm not the thing. To be talking to people and be like, oh hi, how are you? Yeah, yeah, oh my god, the web. Oh, your dog? You brought your four dogs into the shop? Yeah.
You
Oh
can't
my
have those in
god.
here. That's a health code violation.
Yeah. Do I have a pop cup? No, bitch. I don't got a fucking pop cup. We don't got no goddamn whipped cream. Starbucks and the fucking schemes they've created.
Yeah, I
But
know. Influences everything.
eh,
Fuck them. We're boycotting anyway.
you better say it.
Yeah.
You better say it.
Boycott.
With all the shit that's going on, I feel
Yeah.
so proud of my people and of the American people and what they have accomplished through the boycotting and through all of these other things. But
Yeah.
man, what a mess.
And I mean, it should have been sooner,
Period. Their coffee
but
did it anyways.
it is. And it's like it like ruins the entire supply chain of like how much people should be getting paid for shit anyway.
Yeah. Talk about that would be really interesting is to find somebody who works in the Starbucks roastery and be like, hey yo, I need you to air the fucking dirt
Yeah.
on the
I
show
bet
and
they ha
talk.
I bet they have to sign like NDAs though.
Oh yeah, though. That's
Yo,
fucking wild.
they probably all sign NDAs and like weird like non-compete kind of things or like
That
non-disclosure. Like yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely think the non-compete thing is for sure. I'm very curious if they do have to sign an NDA. See, there's
I
something so fucking culty and creepy about Starbucks.
I think so too. I think NDAs are really weird. But I don't know. I'm not a business person.
Neither am I though.
Yeah.
Well, I really loved talking to you. This was so
Yeah.
much fucking fun,
This
and
is
you're
fun.
a basket of daisies and sunshine.
Wow. I'm so glad. I've had a really shitty week, so I'm glad that I
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, this was a good like highlight. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad that I got to talk to you and meet you and yeah.
Honestly, you gave such good information. It was a very informative and very satisfying story to listen to at the end of the day.
Welcome to my brain.
That's great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to leave with saying on the show today?
Mm, let me think. I think I'd like to leave um just if anyone is trying different things or wanting to get into new like projects and things like that, you don't have to ask permission to do it. Like you can just do it. And a lot of the times like reach out to people, but be genuine. I think one of the things that bugs me the most a lot of times is when people reach out and it's immediately business and I'm like, I don't want that. But
Right.
like there's moments where you can get to know really nice people. You can be genuine. You can be
Mm,
like someone like um I don't know, be intentional about the things that you're creating, but you don't have to ask permission to
right.
do things. You can create the world that you want and people will come to it.
Yep. That was great. So great with your words, man.
Oh, thank you. Wow.
Wow. Mm. I need to just make that an audio sound, just like
I know, just like a button. Meow.
wow.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on here.
I love the people I meet on the show, and then I hate the fact that they all live so fucking far away.
Where are you based again?
Ohio.
Dang.
Dang.
What part of Ohio?
Columbus.
Columbus? Okay. That makes sense. That is far from a lot of places. Okay, that makes sense doesn't make sense in my brain. I was just like, okay, yeah, where are you based? Why is it far from a lot of places?
Literally in the middle of fucking nowhere. I thankfully live in Columbus, which isn't even that great. But yeah, no, Ohio is just meh.
It's the
Just dumb.
Midwest.
It's fucking cornfields and soybeans.
There's a lot of people who like it. I don't know. I don't know anything about Ohio.
You come up here once and then you can tell me if you like it or not.
Okay, I'll come up once.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I loved talking to you and hearing your story and having you here. You are so sweet and nice, and I feel like you probably have a feisty side that obviously you did not show. Um, I get that energy. But
A little bit.
I loved talking to you. And all three of y'all, Maxie, Haya, and you, are just great people. And
Aw.
I just loved talking to all of you guys.
Aw.
I'm just like, I
Thank
guess who else
you.
is on the next chain? Because y'all just flock together. There must
Oh
be some
yeah,
type of flock
I
here.
love them. I love the chance to get to like see both of them. It's so
Mhm.
fun. They're my people.
Yeah. Well, I will leave you to it then. Enjoy your Friday.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
I loved that episode. That was great. Honestly, though, for most of the people that want to learn about like Brewers Cup and like being from the actual interest and genuine interest of working in coffee, I mean, to gravitating towards working into coffee, like they were talking about how they were just really interested and thought it was really cool, and then it somehow was eased into their life, and then they ended up like doing all these things, their journey to Brewers Cup and getting into nationals and all that, and then placing is wild. And then obviously Tan Brown was so fucking cool. That's such a great community and business to create, and I honestly really do hope the best for them and what they're trying to create, and I hope that other people flock to that. I wanted to also point out that I loved the community aspect that they tried to build during the time where being Asian American wasn't safe. Love that. As much as I am a person that does care about coffee and the origin and the systemic issues, I somehow have now fallen into a political activist. So like that shit's something I really loved. But also, I just think that they're a genuinely good-hearted person, and they care about the people, and they care about the community, and they just want people to come more open-minded. We all just need to be a bit more open-minded. And keep your fucking opinions when you enter a coffee shop. Be yourself. Because why would you come in anyway? Unless you want to get behind the bar and do it. I won't complain. I'll have fun watching you making a mess. But either way, this episode was great. The clan of Maxie, Hyacinth, and now Mar has grown into a 3. I guess I wonder who else we can grow into a 4th. To everyone else who also knows each other. But I loved this episode. If there's any tidbits to find, the TLDRs is Tan Brown Coffee, being in Brewers Cup, caring about working with Asian producers, and their hot take being, don't come in and tell people how to run their coffee.